For National Nurses Week, Fortis is honoring the millions of nursing professionals in our community, caring for loved ones. More so today, the need for nurses is vital, and Fortis College and Institutes recruits people like you to train to become a nurse. Do you want to be a nurse? Start your essential career in nursing with a Fortis education. Just visit fortis.edu to learn about hybrid instruction and online enrollment. Then talk to Fortis by dialing pound 250, keyword nursing school.
Introducing Guinness Nitro Cold Brew Coffee Beer, blending the smooth, creamy nitro taste of Guinness with hints of coffee, chocolate, and caramel. Guinness Nitro Cold Brew Coffee Beer, your new favorite part of the day. Look for it where Guinness is sold. Must be 21 and over to purchase. Please enjoy responsibly. Diageo Beer Company, New York, New York.
The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Two weeks to go in the NBA regular season. Many of you in finals week in your head-to-head matchups, and we rumble along once again. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you all. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. I'm your host, Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. If you want to follow me on Twitter, although at this point in the season, I doubt many of you are looking for a new fantasy basketball podcast. Those of you that are still listening, thank you. For one, and I would ask you all to please don't stop listening just because we hit the off season. I got a lot of good stuff lined up. We'll do some off-season rank boards. We're going to break down every team in the NBA. We'll get everybody ready for free agency. And this will be, by the way, a quick turnaround off-season again. Remember, most of the time, the NBA finals end in early mid-June. The draft is about 2 weeks later. Free agency is about 10 days after that. But you're talking about June to October, where there are no fantasy games. Well, really April to October, there's no fantasy games for us to look at from a full season fantasy perspective. This year, the finals are likely to end in mid-July, slightly later in the month than usual because the regular season here goes till the 16th of May, and usually it's ending by around April 10th or 11th. So slightly later in July. Free agency is like 2 weeks after that, and they're going to try to start the season in October. I think they want to get back on their normal schedule. So our offseason is cut by a little more than a month. Free agency will be pretty close to about the same distance from the end of this regular season coming up, but then between free agency and actual basketball, it's going to be a sprint again. So we're going to rearrange everything, we'll get you ready, and then, of course, we'll do all of our mock drafts and stuff like that. But we got all sorts of things lined up for the offseason, so please do continue to listen. We'll have, if there's any MyBookie odds boost promos going on. How else are you going to know about it other than me tweeting about it rampantly like a crazy person? Anyway, welcome to the show, everybody. The plan is sort of the usual now. It's not the usual for the regular season. It's the usual for the head-to-head playoffs, where we're going to work our way through the weekend. It's a reverse chronological lightning round, but it's just approached a little bit differently because we're looking at things from a stream perspective, meaning both head-to-head and roto streams. What we've affectionately started calling streams of schedule versus streams of opportunity. That's where you're getting it in roto, guys stepping into giant opportunity, even if their schedule's not very good. So let's go through the weekend. Let's see what we figured out. Brooklyn and Milwaukee on Sunday morning. Well, midday, I guess. It wasn't a morning game. Kevin Durant is back, and he is ready to go. It's been an up-and-down season for KD. Generally, when he's been fantastic, but he hasn't been in all that much. He's the number 7 player by averages in fantasy basketball, but he's only played 28 games. So between KD and Anthony Davis, you've got these guys putting up big, fat numbers, but not doing it often enough. KD certainly better than AD on the per-game front, and it really isn't all that close this season. It actually, and KD and Anthony Davis, KD and AD, those guys are going to give us some really interesting talking points in the offseason about where these guys are going to get drafted next year and whether or not it's worth it. But regardless, he's in there, and he'll be playing in non-back-to-backs. I would assume Brooklyn has 2 back-to-backs next week, so his 4-gamer might become 2 rolling into the other end of the regular season. But they have 3 games this week. None of them is a back-to-back. Great. Good news. Wonderful all around. Bruce Brown got back in there, but only played 5 minutes, so he obviously isn't quite fully healthy. Jeff Green hurt his hip, but there was no real post-game note on it, so I would call him day-to-day at worst right now. Deandre Jordan somehow back into the mix for this one. I guess they wanted him to deal with the hulking frame of Brook Lopez. I don't fully understand how the Nets' center rotations are shaking out right now, so you can probably dodge those for all intents and purposes. And because this team doesn't have a good schedule upcoming, you can just punt on anything head-to-head related. Milwaukee, they were on the other side. This ballgame actually against Brooklyn was the middle game of a 5-7 for the Bucks. So they're off today, and then they play tomorrow and Wednesday, and then you want to get the hell out of the Bucks business for 4 days. And if your season goes to the very end, then they've got a 5-gamer the last week of the year, but they only play once between Thursday and Sunday of this week. So as Bucks go, not that they really don't have streamer types. Bobby Portis had food poisoning, so he was out for this ball game, and he's the only one that was close, and that was mostly because Giannis was out. So screw the Bucks. We're going to move along because they're a very simplistic fantasy team at this point. Portland beat Boston. Blazers are shooting the lights out right now, such is the magic of hitting 3-pointers. Both teams actually made quite a few. 19 threes for Portland, 20 for Boston. Difference in this ball game, Boston 18 turnovers, and the Blazers just 9. C.J. McCollum had a big one, which was nice. He hasn't had that many huge ball games lately. Dame was good. Nurk has finally now, and it happened last week really, taken over the center position so Enes Kanter can be safely dropped. Carmelo Anthony has become your streamable on the Portland Trail Blazers, and I only bring that up because today is the end of a 5-7 for Portland. But if you wait 3 days, they actually start another one on Friday. Now that has to matter if your team goes to the very end of the regular season. If they're ending this week, you could probably just hold on to whatever Blazer you were streaming until Saturday. Let them play Saturday and then flip them out on Sunday. Or just get out of the Blazers business after today if there's someone else on the docket that perhaps has a better either schedule or just is a juicier player to use than Carmelo Anthony. That shouldn't be that hard to find. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both had ankle stuff in this ballgame. Marcus Smart got ejected, but presumably that won't have any carryover. And Evan Fournier came out and talked about how COVID has been affecting him. He says he feels like he's playing it with a concussion every day. Like his vision is screwball. He has no depth perception, he said. This is the type of stuff we're talking about. Derrick Rose, Jason Tatum, these guys that took time to get back to where they were before. Well, Fournier's finally now, he's starting to inch closer to it. This is a better ball game. And certainly if Tatum and or Brown have to miss any time, then hell yeah, you take the Fournier plunge. If they don't, I think I'd rather wait to see if this happens again because Boston's schedule isn't very good. They have 2 days off here, today and tomorrow, before they play in Orlando on Wednesday as part of a 3-game week. So for Boston, this is really more about a schedule or a stream of opportunity. Keep an eye on things. If your pickups are a day in advance, tomorrow you could grab Fournier if he's been dropped. He's been held by a lot of teams in the hopes that he could kind of get back to something like this more regularly, but teams are kind of cannibalizing themselves by just waiting on a guy like Fournier at this point in the season. But if he got dropped in your league, keep an eye on him. Again, more so on the roto side. But if we find out that Tatum and or Brown are more injured than it looked like, then you could consider him for potentially both sides of that coin. Nothing else that I'd really do with the Boston Celtics at this point. I guess if everybody's out again, it's the same point. We're recycling a conversation topic. If everyone's out, then a lot of guys move into value, but not enough for me to care all that much. The pecking order would basically be, as guys drop out, Marcus Smart's already on the right side of the ledger. Fournier would first move from the wrong to the right side. Then it would probably be Peyton Pritchard, who would move from the wrong side to the right side of the ledger. Then maybe Aaron Nesmith. I doubt it. He's been okay lately, though. He's scoring a little bit more, but 6 out of 7 shooting is not particularly sustainable. In any event, on to the next one. Knicks beat the Rockets 122-97. New York not messing around in this one. They wanted to get a little bit of rest because they have another one tonight in Memphis, a much tougher ball game. This is part of a nearly season-ending 6-game road trip for the Knicks. It's a tough time to throw in almost a 2-week vacation, or a 2-week trip, I guess, not a vacation. They're in Memphis tonight. Denver, Phoenix, Clippers, Lakers is the rest of this road trip. So the Knicks are, this is the gauntlet at the end of the season for them. They come home and host the Spurs, Hornets, and Celtics. So not that it gets a ton easier, but at least they'll be home for some of those ball games. Meanwhile, the Knicks are very comfortably hanging out in the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. They're not going to be in the play-in tournament, I don't think, although I guess anything could happen. A lot of teams behind them would have to win while they're losing, and admittedly, this is going to be one of the tougher stretches of their whole season, but they're playing well right now. Derrick Rose is back to full tilt, finally. If you could wait that one out, that's great. We talked about D. Rose a billion times on this podcast, just like the wait. How long will it be until he gets his game back post-COVID? And it happened right around April 20th or so. April 18th, April 20th. He started to show those signs of coming around, and it's just continued this upward trend where he's now playing 30, 33, 33, 25. That was a blowout. And he even got 31 in the blowout yesterday. And he's storming the barn. He's crushing at the moment. Last 2 weeks, he's number 50 in 9-cat. Unfortunately, not all of us could wait that long. Some of us, we had to just sort of move guys around because there was a long stretch there where D. Rose was not good. And it was a long stretch. It was like a month after coming back where he wasn't himself. That's hard to sit on someone for that long. But he's there. And that's why we kept watching him every day on this podcast. We were like, all right, is he here that? Is he close? Is he getting there? Because we wanted to be the ones to jump on him when he was. And now look what he's doing. He's their featured guard behind R.J. Barrett, who's almost like a wing being mushed into a guard spot. So Rose, Randall, those guys are killing it in 9-cat. Nerlens was, so they got hurt in this ball game. Well, turned an ankle. We don't know what his status is. He's sort of day-to-day at the moment. We'll see how that shakes out. Taj Gibson, by the way, should be a very good streamer of opportunity in the meantime. You could make an argument that he's kind of a streamer of schedule. Knicks do have 4 games this week and 8 the rest of the way, but it's every other day. So if Nerlens happens to pop back up midweek, then you're going to have to abandon ship on the Taj Gibson thing, and that's kind of annoying. You don't want to have to use another move if you're not actually gaining many games with it. You're just trying to get off of a player. So I would like Taj more on the roto side, since you can abandon ship without using up a weekly move. Reggie Bullock continues to hit three-pointers, so that's cool. And that's your Knicks. Houston side, Christian Wood had a leg thing. There was like calf, quad, ankle. I don't even think they could decide which part of him was in the most pain. But it sounds like he's going to miss a little bit of time. And that is intriguing because we don't really know what the Rockets are going to do if, I would almost say when, Wood misses some time. They have 3 games between Wednesday and Saturday this week. Off for 2 days here. So there is a fleeting chance that he might play through whatever this thing is. But if he sits it out, the last time that Christian Wood had to miss just a little bit of time, and let's do our research here, and then we can kind of see this thing through. Wood has played most of his games recently. He missed one on April the 24th in Denver against the Nuggets. Rockets lost that game 129-116. Kelly Olynyk slid up to play center. That was a pretty easy one to figure out. But they were also missing Kevin Porter Jr., because he was in COVID protocols at that point. So, Jayshawn Tate was the starting shooting guard. He actually got hurt mid-ball game there. That also kind of threw things out of whack. Armani Brooks slid in as, I guess, the point guard, but there sort of wasn't really one. It was actually kind of point center with Kelly Olynyk. DJ Wilson started, and KJ Martin Jr. started in that ball game. Yesterday for the Rockets, Olynyk started, Wood started. Those are easy ones. KPJ started, Jayshawn Tate, and Avery Bradley, who started and played 20 minutes. Off the bench, KJ Martin played 32 minutes. He was the only bench player yesterday that was worth even a glance. The rest of them were all under 20 minutes. Daquan Jeffries had 19. Armani Brooks played 18. That was the closest anybody got to 20 minutes on the Rockets. So comparing the two results from these ball games suggests that, first of all, KPJ will be in there. That's a not even a question mark. Avery Bradley didn't play in that game that Wood missed a couple weeks ago also. So I suppose there's a possibility that he also chews up some time. So Kevin Porter Jr., Avery Bradley, let's say they're taking about 60 minutes off the table. They played 57 combined yesterday. We'll round up just for ease of use. So those guys weren't in there, and now they are. Christian Wood, you take him out, that gives 35 minutes back. So there's still 25 minutes from that game 2 weeks ago that are not likely to be available to the Rockets in this next one. And I would venture to guess that most of the minutes that are not available come more on the guard side. So Jae'Sean Tate probably slides up and plays small forward, or something to that effect. Kevin Porter Jr. is going to be your starting point guard. Avery Bradley is probably your starting shooting guard for the Rockets' next game. This is, again, assuming Christian Wood is out. So that leaves the power forward slot open. And I guess there's a wacky universe where Tate could even slide up and play power forward. Then it would still leave the small forward slot open. So it's a forward position that's going to be open for the Rockets, and that's where we're going to try to find our value. Would they start KJ Martin Jr.? If that game from a couple weeks ago is any indicator, I already forgot what day that was, April 24th. If that game is any indicator, the answer is maybe. Because DJ Wilson also started that game. And it wasn't really clear who was the power forward and who was the small forward. I don't know that it needed to be. But, one thing that I think we can keep in mind. First of all, DJ Wilson didn't play yesterday. KJ Martin is absolutely positively ahead of him in the Rockets' pecking order. And the reason I'm going through this so thoroughly on a Monday podcast for a team that doesn't play until Wednesday is that for many of you, in Roto in particular, you're making your moves a day in advance. If you're looking at head-to-head, you can probably wait until that day to get a better idea of what Christian Wood's status is, and maybe we get more info on whether they expect him to play at all this week. Head-to-head, I don't like it. Because unless we find out that Wood is out for the entire week, then that's another situation where you're picking up a guy and maybe having to drop him for no reason other than his role just kind of shrinks and it's not a good stream anymore. As I've said before, in Roto, you can get away with that sort of thing. So I would consider a KJ Martin pickup on the news that Christian Wood is probably going to miss a little bit of time. You can expect...
For National Nurses Week, Fortis is honoring the millions of nursing professionals in our community, caring for loved ones. More so today, the need for nurses is vital, and Fortis College and Institutes recruits people like you to train to become a nurse. Do you want to be a nurse? Start your essential career in nursing with a Fortis education. Just visit fortis.edu to learn about hybrid instruction and online enrollment. Then talk to Fortis by dialing pound 250, keyword nursing school.
Discount Tire has just made tire shopping easier. Their touchless experience allows you to buy tires and book your appointment online. Then when you drive in, you can stay safely inside your car as the tires are installed. Discount Tire. Let's get you taken care of.
Well, not great numbers. But if you look at his game log, when he plays 30 minutes or more, he tends to score in double figures. He tends to get at least one block. He tends to get about 5-6 rebounds, somewhere in that neck of the woods. And he tends to shoot the ball relatively well from the field. In fact, on the season in 21 minutes, he's shooting 51%. Last 30 days of minutes have trended up. Not enough. He's still at 50% there. And last couple weeks, he's playing 27 minutes. The problem, of course, here for Martin is that he doesn't get much usage. He doesn't really hit the three ball. His free throw shooting isn't very good. And unless the blocks can overwhelm things, you're talking about a guy that's not really a specialist in any one thing. It's just kind of meh in a whole bunch of categories, and you're counting on that as a potential float. I don't even think that in Roto you can look at it and say, oh, well, like if you need blocks, go get him. But he is probably the winner in the if Christian Wood misses time sweepstakes. Let's keep rumbling along. Phoenix Suns beat the Thunder 123-120. This was your prototypical letdown game for Phoenix after a very difficult part of their schedule that they handled relatively well. Suns had the Clippers and the Jazz. Before that, they had the Knicks, the Nets, the Celtics, the Sixers, the Bucks on their road trip. It had been this crushing run for Phoenix, and then all of a sudden they got the Thunder at the end of all of it. They're on the road at Cleveland and Atlanta. They got the Knicks at home, Lakers again towards the end of the week, so it ramps back up pretty quick for the Suns, who got another nice game from Torrey Craig. And last week I was like, well, I don't know that we can trust him because I thought Jay Crowder would come back at some point last week. He didn't. And I'm going to issue the same warning this week. I think Jay Crowder comes back at some point. However, Torrey Craig does appear to be the guy. Cam Johnson was dealing with a little injury, nagging thing coming into this ballgame, so he came off the bench and played 21 minutes. But it seems like Craig is the guy for now. But better for Roto than head-to-head because you don't want to have to just drop a guy midweek. On the Thunder side, well, they sort of were who we thought they were, meaning they had 5 games this last week. They don't have anybody, really, maybe Lou Dort, not really, as it turned out, that could hit the radar in Roto formats. But the rest of the team was almost exclusively I'll start this guy because he has 5 games in 7 days situation. Ty Jerome was pretty good. If you roll all 5 games together, Theo Maledon was... Actually, Jerome missed one. He was 4 out of 5. Maledon didn't play all that well over the week. Had this decent one. And, again, mush it all together over 5 games. It was okay. Kenrich Williams, Isaiah Roby, all those guys were okay if you mushed it all together in 5 games. And none of them is worth using on a per-game basis. We continue. By the way, you can pretty much punt on your Thunder now. Kings beat the Mavericks again. I mean, I really can't understand how this one happened. Kings swept the Mavericks in the season series. 3-0. Sacramento got their 27th win of the year. And they've won 2 games in a row. Don't look now, but the Kings are trying to blow up the Western Conference playoff race because they've beaten the Mavericks and the Lakers in their last 2 ball games. Those teams, by the way, Mavs, Blazers, Lakers, all tied for the 5 seed right now. LeBron is not happy about the play-in tournament. Probably because his 2 superstars in the Lakers have missed 3.5 months combined this year. I think generally he's just not happy about the ridiculously fast turnaround and what it led to, but it's going to be an interesting stretch run here. A lot to unpack on the Kings side in particular. The Mavericks, they finished now their 5-game week. Dallas has a pretty packed schedule the rest of the way, but if you're looking at them, you're not picking up anybody until Thursday. So they go 3 games Thursday through Sunday. It's actually part of a 5-7 if your season goes beyond the end of this week. But I don't think that you're venturing too deep into Mavericks territory anyway, because the non-Luka and Porzingis is back out again, but really the non-Luka and non-KP guys are really only worth using in a 5-7 scenario. It was nice to see Dwight Powell play relatively well again. Just doesn't seem like he can carve out a role when Porzingis is healthy. For the Kings, Tyrese Halliburton hurt his knee. He's scheduled for an MRI today. I would actually be kind of surprised if he played at any point the rest of this year. Kings have 8 games left. What's the point? You got a great season out of your rookie. There's no real purpose in pushing him forward. So I think he's probably done for the year. I might be wrong, but that's the impression I'm getting. You can probably drop him in head-to-head. Roto, you can hang on, I guess, if you're anywhere near your actual games cap. All that to say that there are some things happening in Kingsland. Aaron Fox is still out for presumably another week or so. Maybe he doesn't come back. I don't know. Regardless, it's still on right time. Good Lord, I love saying that. In any context, it's great. It's still on right time. Pick him up, start him. I don't care whether it's head-to-head or Roto. They got 4 games this week. I can't imagine that he's not starting with Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox both out. I don't know what else they could possibly do there. He's a point guard. He's the one they've got left. And he's going to be great. In starters minutes, we know what he can do. He's a top 60 guy. So just run him out there. And when someone comes back, you can kind of reassess things a little bit. But I got to think you're getting at least 2 to 3 games of full Delon Wright starting and maybe more. Meanwhile... Feels like I'm doing the Super Friends. Meanwhile, Marvin Bagley, 34 minutes in his second game back. 23 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, a steal, a 3-ball. Good field goal percent. He's going through some stuff at the free throw line this year. That does concern me. He's certainly better equipped to be a points league asset. But I think you can. I think you probably just have to add him and see what happens. I don't know if I can. I really don't know if I'm comfortable starting Marvin Bagley. He's shown himself too many times this year to just be a detriment to fantasy teams. But when he gets the big minutes and big usage, he can get close to overwhelming the bad free throw percent. So I think you got to add him, and with all these guys out, you probably have to start him. Yeah, throw him in there, see what happens. Philadelphia, they're now settled into sort of a start the starters kind of thing, and on the San Antonio side, they rested everybody. So just throw this one out. This is a nothing game. We'll just keep going. Miami 121, Charlotte 111. Andre Iguodala hurt his hip in this ball game, which is a trademark old man injury, but it sounds like he's day-to-day. All that does in the short term is it makes Trevor Ariza an even more intriguing stream. He was on our list of roto streams for most of last week, although they did have that back-to-back over the weekend. The Heat don't have a particularly good head-to-head schedule here, so you're not streaming anyone for schedule on Miami. They only have 3 games this week, and they're spread out real wide. They have 1 game over the first 4 days of the week, then 2, they go Friday, Sunday to finish things off. So this is very much a roto target. Goran Dragic is playing for Miami nightly, probably because they don't want to drop into that damn 7 spot. Heat winners of 3 in a row, they're finally getting lasered in. I think they probably feel like they can pass the Hawks for the 5 seed, and they'd want to, because that would get them the Knicks in the first round instead of the Bucks. There's an ever so slight talent jump between those two teams. Not effort, but talent. I don't think you're passing the Knicks. Maybe you are, I don't know. Said they've got a tougher portion of the schedule coming up. Point is, for the Heat, you're not looking for anybody that's fringy. You only want guys that are well above the cut line. And lately, actually, Ariza's been above the cut line. You guys know I've liked his fantasy game for a really long time. And he's doing the stuff he needs to do, which is 3-pointers, steals, rebounds, blocks. Over the last 2 weeks, Trevor's number 116 because his free throw percent was 61.5. But he's at 9 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and almost a block during that stretch. If you sort of level off the non-weird numbers, he's easily inside the top 100. In fact, over the last week, where his free throw percent is at 70 instead of 61. I mean, that makes a big difference. Field goal percent is at 46, which is actually ever so slightly above Trevor's career mark. 2 threes, 12 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, 1.8 steals, 1.3 blocks. That will trend down, but he's a startable guy in Roto right now. He's 3-and-D with a little extra goodies mixed in. What about Kendrick Nunn? With Dragic playing, Hero's been out, and that's kind of allowed Nunn to get this sort of free reign that he's acquired once again. There's always somebody out on Miami. That's the one thing you can feather in your cap. He's very score-only kind of fantasy guy. So I think probably a bit more suited for points leagues. You could potentially stream him if you need 3-pointers because he has been pretty good in that respect lately. He's actually inside the top 100 for the year in your great surprise of the century. But he's also really hot right now. He's hitting 54% of his shots and 3 3-pointers a game over the last month. So to that end, you probably just keep using him in Roto, in whatever format, because he's been good enough. And then if guys come back and knock him off his pedestal, then you deal with it then. We're at a point in the season where you're not really looking, oh, what happens when so-and-so comes back? Because they may not. There's 2 weeks left. LaMelo Ball came back for the Hornets over the weekend. Cody Martin got hurt for the Hornets over the weekend. And what does that mean? Well, LaMelo was mostly taking stuff away from Devontae Graham. And my concern, I actually thought they would go a different direction. I thought they'd go heavier on the guards. But it actually turns out that LaMelo and Malik Monk both coming back at the same time was just sort of too much for the guard rotation to handle. It's too much. This team has a ton of guys that can handle guard stuff and not that many that can handle forward stuff. Miles Bridges, who's already taken an ever so slight dip as guys get healthy. By the way, still no timetable on Gordon Hayward, so you can keep rolling Miles Bridges out there. P.J. Washington, he's rolled back into his nice spot with this team. And then with Cody Martin getting hurt, it looked like it thrust Jalen McDaniels back into decent minutes. I'm not taking the plunge on Jalen McDaniels. Charlotte has 4 games this week and 4 again next week, and schedule is fine, but my concern will remain, as always, who comes back and when. If Cody Martin comes back midweek, there was no point in picking up Jalen McDaniels. Malik Monk, he'll probably get his 20-some-odd minutes, and he loves to chuck shots. But that's very points league. He had 5 assists in that ball game yesterday, but I don't think you can really count on that continuing. So leave him alone. Toronto, resting different bodies on a daily basis, got a win over the Lakers, trying to work LeBron James and Anthony Davis back into things together now. LeBron, ankle soreness, sent him out with about 7 minutes to go in the ball game. Hopefully, this is more about treatment and just maintaining than anything else. The Lakers were down, I think, 18, 19 points at the time, so things were kind of slipping away. They made it tighter down the stretch, but it never really got all that close. Kuzma had a big ball game. AD still can't shoot. He's still off. He's still rusty as heck, but little by little he's getting there. Anthony Davis, by the way, probably the bust of the season. But let's see if we can squeeze anything out of him here. Andre Drummond still finding a way to keep a role, and then certainly LeBron. Kuzma's the one, to me, that probably disappears. He's finding a way to do other things, but 6 3-pointer is not sustainable. He had 5 blocks in the Lakers' 2 games over the weekend. So he's doing other stuff, but there's just too many things that are wrong with Kuzma's fantasy game. In 28 and a half minutes a game this year, he's number 183. So a couple half-decent games where peripheral stats are better, that's not going to convince me to change my opinion. Yeah, I know he's in the top 75 over the last 2 weeks, but look, LeBron just came back. Kuzma didn't really capitalize on guys being out all that much. Kudos to him for adapting his game a little bit, but fantasy-wise, it's not going to be enough. I guess unless LeBron has to miss time, then we can reassess from there. Let's keep moving. Let's turn the page back to Saturday. This is not going as speedily as I hoped. Detroit... what the hell is going on with this team? You pretty much just have to watch to see who's in and who's out on a nightly basis. It seems like the veterans are pretty much done, which would mean that Sadiq Bey, Isaiah Stewart, those guys have been playing every game anyway, but if you take Mason Plumlee out of the equation, then Stewart gets very good. If you made it through Detroit's 3-game week, now you've got a 5er on tap. So Bey and Stewart are going to be great for the 5-game week. You might even argue for a Frank Jackson stream because when Corey Joseph, Jeremy Grant, Wayne Ellington, and Plumlee are all out, he steps into a pretty big scoring role. Killian Hayes is definitely a start when Joseph sits, and that's about as far as I go. Josh Jackson might play in all 5 games, but he's built much more for points leagues as well. He might do more damage than good for your team in 5 games. It's kind of the Darius Baisley effect there. But then we have to wait, because what if Joseph and Plumlee and Grant and Ellington, what if these guys do surface for 2 or 3 games this week? Well, then it punts a bunch of these guys back into non-roto-friendly. So I think you just hold on to many of them, I guess. Bey, like I said, Bey you can start every night. No one's taking his job. Stewart, I'd only start when Plumlee's out. Hayes, I'm only starting when Joseph is out. And then flip it. When those guys are in, you start those guys. It's a mess, man. They're in some real fun tanking business over there, and it's a little annoying. Warriors blew out the Rockets on Saturday. Juan Toscano-Anderson had 9 defensive stats in 34 minutes of this ballgame. Andrew Wiggins had a sore knee, kind of played through it, but we'll monitor that, see if he sticks it out. Steph was not that great, actually. He had 30 points, but it took him 23 shots to get there. 7 more 3-pointers, though. It's weird to call that not that great. It's not that great for Steph. No Kelly Oubre. No Damian Lee still. Trying to piece some bodies together on this Warriors team. So what does that mean? Well, Jordan Poole had one of his games where he takes a bunch of shots, but that's not a guy you're using. The Warriors are screwy. They've got a back-to-back today and tomorrow against the Pelicans twice. They play them again next week, by the way. And then they've got the Thunder twice this week also. So you're like, well, they're playing some teams that want to score and run, but there's a possibility of a couple of blowouts with those Thunder games. This is a very dangerous time to be expanding your Warriors pool. I will say, and that's not a pun, by the way, Jordan Poole is not the guy that I would expand it to. Kent Bazemore is the guy that I would consider expanding my Warriors to, even on the roto side, because he's going to get you his steals, his threes. He rebounded better than usual in this ball game. That's not usually going to be the big thing. But I think you could probably stream Baze as long as Oubre's out. That's where we were at before, so might as well be there again. Indy got Domantas Sabonis back, and boy, did he make an impact. 26, 19, and 14. Doug McDermott had 31. O'Shea Brissett slid down to play power forward. He had another big ball game, so I guess you can keep rolling him out there. We'll see what happens if or when Goga Batadze comes back, but for now, those four guys are your starts. TJ McConnell, I think you can start as well. He probably would have played more if this game wasn't a crazy blowout. Malcolm Brogdon, when he comes back, that does shake things up a little bit. I don't think I would play Doug McDermott when guys like Brogdon come back. Edmund Sumner, by the way, played the first 12 minutes of this ballgame and then left with a sore knee, but I think he's expected to play in their next ballgame. But if McDermott is starting, then screw it. Fire him up. I'm good with that. He's a three-point specialist. He'll score a bunch. Pretty good with free throws, so why the hell not? And then, of course, watch the injury report. Cleveland, I'm skipping over some teams because we already talked about them. Kevin Love had one weird game over the weekend where he just refused to take a shot, and then in this one, he took a bunch. Darius Garland was out, so Cedi Osman, who was about to turn into a pumpkin, was able to get a little bit more wiggle room because they slid Isaac Okoro down to shooting guard, took Garland's spot in the backcourt. Osman got another start, and then he's kind of the front court facilitator for this team. 15 points, 11 assists. I don't have an update on Garland. I think he's day-to-day. We don't know. I mean, again, we're talking about another team that has nothing to play for. Cavaliers 21-43, ever so slight step forward on the year, but they're in tank mode now. So why rush him back? I think you stream Cedi as long as he's starting. But really, I need one of those two backcourt guys to be out. I need one of the two high usage dudes, Sexton or Garland. One of them needs to be on the shelf if I'm going to trust Cedi Osman. And that's more on the roto side. Because it's that same thing where what if you pick up a guy, he loses his job, and you have to drop him midweek. Cavs play 4 times the last 6 days of this week. But I don't think there's anybody that I would trust there. By the way, Dean Wade had a pretty good ball game here. Again, don't care. 18 points on 6 3-pointers, and that was basically it. So it all comes down to whether or not Darius Garland is playing, if you're going to mess around with the Cavaliers. Memphis, speaking of messing around, messed around and lost to the Orlando Magic. De'Anthony Melton, only 19 minutes. Would they have won had he played more? I don't know. But 7-6 with 3 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and a 3-pointer. He just gets it done, man. Slow-mo exploded for 21. One of his best games since the return of Jaren Jackson Jr., who was quieter. And this is something that we anticipated with JJJ. He was going to come back with all that adrenaline, kaboom, adrenaline style, and then reality was going to set in, that his body wasn't really ready for an NBA season, particularly not jumping in with a team that suffered a number of postponements and are making up games left and right now. They've got the Knicks tonight. They have 9 games left this year. And they basically are just trading off back-to-backs and non-back-to-backs the rest of the way, with the exception of the only 4-game-in-5-night bucket for any team the entire season next week. They go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Youch! So that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing Jaren Jackson Jr. dealing with the adrenaline wearing off and his body trying to reacclimate to an NBA schedule. You can still start him if you want, but expect this to be a little dip, and we don't know how long it's going to last. And with the season only 2 weeks longer, is there enough time for him to come out of that dip? Don't draft injured guys. I'm actually considering benching Slow-Mo, although this ball game gives me pause on that, but Melton's a go. Ja, more so for points leagues, certainly, than anything else, but he's a go. You just kind of have to at this point. And then Dylan Brooks, more points league type of guy as well. On the Orlando side, Cole Anthony, another game winner. Unheralded young fella, has 2 of them this year. He's a go. Orlando went a little goofball in this ball game. They had their reserves come in and fight their way back into it. So you got some kind of off-kilter things. Gary Harris, by the way, worth mentioning, he's playing in their back-to-backs right now. Did not have a good ball game here, but overall he's actually been relatively decent. Not quite good enough for me in Roto. In Roto, I would start Cole Anthony, Mo Bamba, who was not great, but blocked a couple shots, and that kind of saved things, and Mo Wagner, as long as Chuma Okeke's out. And it seems like they're going to be real cautious with Chuma, so you can probably even start Wagner in head-to-head this week. He's playing giant minutes, and if he plays giant minutes, the fantasy stats are going to be equally massive. I mean, he's to me a guy you race out and pick up because it's a streamer of opportunity with this team that's not a terrible schedule. They have 8 games the rest of the way, every other day this week. And yeah, you might have to drop him midweek, which is kind of annoying, but it might be worth it because he could really go huge for as many ball games as he has the room to do so. RJ Hampton had a big one off the bench, but I don't trust it. This is more of the flash in the pan, I think. And then Dwayne Bacon, talked about him enough. No, pass. Love the Mo Wagner stuff right now, though. Pelicans beat the Wolves in overtime, 140-136. Lonzo, he really does make that team better. Say what you want about the Pels and say what you want about Lonzo Ball. They are better with him healthy, and it's not really a question mark. Willie Hernan-Gomez, 12-12. The double boxcars. Double-double for Willie, and then he'll be fine. That's the kind of crap you're going to get out of him as long as Steven Adams is out. There's not going to be much else to his fantasy game. So kind of a rebounding field goal percent streamer. Jackson Hayes would be his backup. He has the better fantasy game, but he's probably not going to play enough to utilize it. Eric Bledsoe, just barely enough. And unfortunately, that means no one outside of the starting 5 for the Pels can quite get there. Ricky Rubio's had a couple good ball games in a row for the Wolves, and this one happened to coincide with D'Angelo Russell getting off to kind of a slow start and then turning it on a little bit later. But for Rubio, to his credit, he has regained his point guard job on that team. So Minnesota, you can pretty much start the starters with the exception of Jaden McDaniels. That's it. And then adding in D'Angelo Russell. Sorry, he's off the bench. Chicago, it's a rough time right now. No Vooch and no Zach LaVine. By the way, I wonder what this would do to a locker room. Bulls are in real trouble. First of all, they're 3 games out of the play-in spot. Season completely came apart after the trade deadline. They were almost ready to work in Vooch, and then LaVine went down with protocols. But this is what I'm talking about. What does this do to a team dynamic? Because we don't know. We don't really know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. We can certainly guess based on how things go in protocols and quarantine. But LaVine had COVID. That doesn't mean he didn't get vaccinated because there are these examples of like 1 in 4,000 to 5,000. They call them breakthrough. But the vaccines have been incredibly effective at preventing illness and shortening illness and all that good stuff. So I'm going to safely, I think, assume that LaVine didn't get vaccinated. And I'm not going to go into anything on this. This isn't a podcast about how you take care of your body. I hope you all do, because every time someone does, we all move just a little bit closer to normalcy. But that's not what this pod's about. This pod is about, what does that do to a team dynamic? Because we know, we heard these silly anecdotes about Thad Young, who, by the way, is going to kill it if Vooch has to miss any more time. Go, Thad, go. I love it, man. I cannot believe that Thad Young turned out to be a thing this year. That floors me. Completely floors me. He's played 60 games. He's inside the top 100 for the season now after that brutal start to the year by totals. Let's get the totals numbers for Thad. I just want to do it. 69! He's inside the top 70 by totals. I can't believe it. All right. Anyway, the thought I was having, and will continue, is you're talking about the face of the team in Zach LaVine, the guy that everybody else on the club looks to for leadership, for guidance, for the big bucket, all of that stuff. The Bulls were already scuffling, but you could pin a lot of that on trying to adjust to having a basically like an entire roster overhaul at the trade deadline. Because they sent out Daniel Gafford, they sent out Wendell Carter Jr., they brought in Nick Vucevic, they brought in Troy Brown Jr., they sent out. I mean, the list goes on and on. There was a ton of roster turnover, and that type of stuff doesn't just fix itself overnight. But they were squeezing out wins here and there. They were just ever so slightly sub 500 as those guys were figuring out how to play with one another. And then, boom, LaVine goes down, and the team has gone into a complete tailspin. I mean, I guess it could be worse. They've won a couple of games. They beat the Heat in there, and a surprise win. They beat the Hornets in there, beat the Cavs. They beat the Celtics. So a couple of surprise wins. But for the most part, they've been bad. They've been bad without Zach LaVine. And they're even worse without Vooch. And I'm kind of beating around the bush here, but I just wonder. We know that most of these guys on the team were vaccinated. We know Thad joking about how he was the one guy who got it in his right arm. What does it say? And right or wrong, look, I'm not going to pass judgment on whether or not whatever you feel or whatever the team feels. We're not here to pass judgment on whether whatever those feelings are, whether they're right or wrong. But I do wonder if this thing, which is ultimately a personal choice, could that fracture a locker room? Because LaVine getting COVID basically coincided with the Bulls' playoff hopes disappearing. He went down, they went down. Wizards have been surging, so that's sort of the other side of that equation. Washington coming roaring out of nowhere to just sort of blitz past everybody else. But what if LaVine doesn't go down? What if they're like 2 games better over their last 10, and they're only 1 game behind the Wizards right now instead of 3? That's all it would take. A couple of little tiny wins. Maybe they beat the Cavs in that game on April 21st. I don't know. Maybe they beat the Hawks last night if LaVine's healthy. Hawks haven't looked very good lately. What would it mean? Do they blame him? I'm sure there'll be plenty of time to just let it blow over, but I think it could be a thing right now. In the meantime, with no Vooch, Daniel Tice is their starting center, so he's a streamer in Roto if Vooch has to miss any more time. And there's a possibility that as the Bulls see this thing begin to slip away, maybe they do kind of put a pin in Vooch and LaVine. And if that's the case, well, they're going to have to find a way to score. But Kobe White's going to go nuts for as long as that's... And he didn't have a good ball game here. He just couldn't hit his shots. But assume that'll level itself out. Tice would be a great add in that instance. It doesn't sound like Vooch is in that bad a shape. He was considered a game-time decision, and he's already questionable for their back-to-back. I think they've got one in Philly tonight. Am I getting that right? Hosting Philly. Excuse me, I had the venue wrong. So Vooch might just pop right back in there, but if anything goes wrong on that front, jump on Tice as fast as humanly possible. On the Atlanta side, Trae Young is back, and he's rolling, 33-7. Figured the Bulls were going to be able to slow him down. John Collins, big ball game. Bogdan Bogdanovic back. That was a big deal for them. They've needed him as the other playmaker. Clint Capella, he's back. Couldn't hit a free throw to save his life, but he's back. And, of course, this turns Gallo into a bit of a pumpkin. Just, it's nice to see the Hawks getting healthy again because that was a team that just lost everybody right at the same time. Kevin Huerter also played. Thought that would be a much longer absence. Wasn't good, so should he have? I don't know. But he did, and that's good for Atlanta, too. Certainly solidifies the fantasy side of things. Washington lost a tough one in Dallas. Russell Westbrook has really gone bananas late this season. And I've got to think that his recent play probably completely changes how people look at him in fantasy next year. Because he was unusable for long stretches this season, and he's been much better lately. He's actually inside the top 100 on a per-game basis, which doesn't seem like it should be a big thing, but it is because of how bad he was before that. He's been top 50 now for 2 months. Still only shooting 67% at the free throw line, but field goal percent's up to 45. He's averaging 24, 12, and 12 over that stretch. This is 9-cat. So Russ, apparently a top 50 guy all of a sudden. And, of course, he and Beal are pretty much doing all of it themselves. Davis has cooled off, which makes him a difficult play. Daniel Gafford is the other guy you can use on that team, 9-7 with a couple of blocks. If he's getting 25 minutes, he's good to go. For Dallas, again, we've already talked about them, but it really just does come down to whether or not Kristaps Porzingis is playing, because if he doesn't, one of those other centers might be okay, but not enough for me to trust him. Denver beat the Clippers. Jokic, another big ball game. He's your MVP guy, guys. Michael Porter Jr. was good. Campazzo had been kind of a point guard-y stream, but their schedule's lightened up a little bit now, so I don't think you necessarily need to stick with that. And it's probably a two-man team at the moment in Denver, with the schedule not overloaded. It's fine. Their schedule's not bad, but it's not 5-7 like it was 2 weeks ago to last week. So you're pretty much just using the two guys that have Roto or over the cut line in Roto. Clippers got Kawhi Leonard back. He looked a little rusty. Didn't really assert himself. 16 points, 5 boards, 6 assists. He'll be fine. Fire him back up again. Reggie Jackson played 30 minutes. His role will trend down with Kawhi back. Batum's role trends down. Marcus Morris's role trends down. Kawhi coming back just pretty much punches a hole into everything here. Rajon Rondo played 30 minutes in this ball game, which is notable because if it happens again, you probably roll him out there. But no, not yet. Not yet. I don't think that sticks. There's too many options for the Clippers for orchestrating. I feel like this one ended up with more Rondo because Paul George was so bad. Talked about Toronto already. They just got guys jumping in and out. Although we didn't really talk about Toronto. Kem Birch is a go. They're a very roto-y team right now. Malachi Flynn, I think you can... his percentages are not very good. I think he's a guy you started for their 5-game weekend head-to-head. I don't think that you have to in a 3-game week, so he's probably a drop. Find somebody else playing more games this week. And then the rest of those guys, you just kind of hang on because their veterans are playing in the non-back-to-backs, which is what they've got this week. And then Birch, if you want to call him a veteran, you can throw him on top of the fire there. On the Utah side, Mike Conley's missed a few games in a row. That's been big for Bojan. Finally, he's getting it going. Royce O'Neal's been good. Basically, since Donovan Mitchell went down, he's had to do a little bit more. Ingles, Gobert, that's all fine. Jordan Clarkson, I don't think is a must-start guy. His shooting's been terrible. He's crazy volume. If you need what he brings, he's more of a specialist at this point. And then we ask ourselves the question, as we do every time on Monday, did we miss anything from Friday? And the answer is a resounding no, question mark? I think everybody played over the weekend this time. I think. All right, I want to get this sucker wrapped up. I think we're over 50 minutes here on going through every team in the NBA. What's coming up on Monday night? It's a medium-sized Monday, 8-game card. That, as we've been talking about, you're pretty much looking at injury stuff. For Indiana, who's playing? Is Malcolm Brogdon playing? Assuming Sabonis is in there. Does Batadze play? Can they go huge? Is Sumner in? Is McDermott starting? A lot of injury questions on the Indiana. Very few on the Washington side, actually. We talked about them just a minute ago. They're kind of 3 guys and out. Orlando, they have injury questions. Is Terrence Ross ever going to show his face again? Chuma Okeke's already been ruled out, which means Mo Wagner is going to kick ass tonight. Detroit, who's in, who's out? We haven't gotten the report on them yet. I'm assuming the veterans are sitting out one half of the back-to-back, maybe both. Warriors. Kelly Oubre, his status, that will influence whether or not you want to do Kent Bazemore. I don't think there's anything with New Orleans you're watching for. Portland, Norman Powell got added to the injury report with some tendinopathy. If he's out, it's not entirely clear what they go there. Probably Anthony Simons. It'll be more shots for Melo as well. But I don't think I would dive into that. Atlanta sounds like they're getting healthy, so just, dial it back to what they were before. Philly, starters, Bulls. I guess Zach LaVine could reappear at some point here. Too late, you jerk. My fantasy team died thanks to 9 injuries in 11 days. LaVine being one of them. Made it to the semis. So upset. I almost won. I can't believe it was even as close as it was. I lost 6-5 in an 11-cat league. And with the number of injuries, I had so many injuries, I had to use all of my roster moves for the week on replacing injured guys, and I still had 2 more injured guys I couldn't get rid of. That's how rough it got. Oops. Well, what are you going to do? So Chicago, yeah, there's a lot of injury stuff going on there. Mostly just a ton of Thad if guys sit things out. Knicks, Nerlens Noel is on the injury report. Grizzlies, Grayson Allen's actually been the only guy dinged up. Interested to see how this ball game goes. Memphis is in this rough scheduling stretch, just playing every day pretty much. Are they running out of gas? Because their shooting sure stinks lately. Spurs, they rested everybody. Now they'll probably play them here in Utah. If they do, that should be pretty much as expected. Utah, nothing. Denver, I don't think there's really anything with Denver, although it sounds like Monte Morris is getting close to coming back, and I think he'll probably retake a lot of that point guard work because Campazzo seems like he's also kind of run out of gas. And Monte Morris might be worth a stream when he comes back. We'll let it happen first, though. I'm not going to jump right into a ton of stuff. Does LeBron play for the Lakers tonight is the big question. Does AD play on the back-to-back? They need to get some wins here somehow, but this is maybe not the best time to try to do it. They're 4-point underdogs, which makes me think that both LeBron and AD are going to sit this one out, which, as we saw before, also, by the way, Dennis Schroeder in protocol for the Lakers is going to mean a ton of who the hell knows what. KCP is probably going to have to take a bunch of shots. You're going to see Talen Horton-Tucker probably take a bunch of shots. Kuz will. Let's get nuts with usage for the Lakers for a night. Good grief. All right, let's get this thing wrapped up. Shout out to our buddies at Manscaped.com. They've got a big thing they're unrolling later this week. Can't wait to tell you guys about that. And please do check out mybookie.ag. Open up an account with promo code HOOPBALL. Start gambling today with our buddies. You bet, you win, they pay. I am Dan Bespers. This is Fantasy NBA Today. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Bespers. Again, keep listening. Keep listening, folks. We do damage here because we're always prepared. Can't prepare for an injury a day, but you can prepare for everything else. Have a great Monday, everybody. Back at you tomorrow morning. More stream and talk as we wind down the NBA season. Yep. Countdown time. We'll talk to you then.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.
From earaches to strep tests, there's Minute Clinic at CVS. See a provider, fill a prescription, and grab essentials. Or see us online with telehealth options. That's healthier made easier. Visit Minute Clinic at CVS today. Services vary by location. See MinuteClinic.com for details.